Well, the authorities in Kenya have declared Tuesday, February 11th, a national holiday for people to attend the state funeral of former President Daniel Arap Moi. Mr. Moi died on Tuesday at a private hospital in the capital, Nairobi, of an unspecified illness. He was 95 years old. He was Kenya's longest-serving president after spending 24 years in power. And in the 24 years of his rule, many supporters praised him for keeping Kenya stable compared to its neighbors. But detractors criticized him for rampant corruption that spread under his watch and for the torture and silencing of his opponents. One of those is Mugo Theoruri, co-editor of We Live to Tell, which is a collection of tales from survivors of torture cells that were operated during Arap Moi's time in power. Theory now hopes for a reckoning after Moi's death.
Mugo Theoruri was held for 49 days in a cell filled with water. That was in 1986, during the presidency of Daniel Arap Moi. It was located in the basement of Nyayo House, a building where Moi's government installed torture chambers.
But I said, no, I don't know anything about the things you are saying. I didn't know that I was going to suffer very intense, very beastly torture.
On Tuesday, February the 4th, Moi died peacefully in hospital, surrounded by his family. He was 95. Hours after his death, coverage of his divisive legacy split along familiar lines. Supporters praising him for keeping Kenya stable compared to its neighbors. Detractors criticizing him for rampant corruption that spread under his watch and for the torture and silencing of his opponents. But for Theory, who co-edited a collection of tales from survivors of the torture cells, Moi was not simply a hero or villain.
His regime was brutal. He was a brutal person. That's what I can't hide. I'm not ashamed of saying. He was a brutal tyrant. But sometimes I tend to say, no, fine. He was also suffering somewhere. He was also held hostage by other forces. Maybe he suffered more than I did, because he could not have closed his mind. His conscience could not have ignored the atrocities that were committed, either through his orders or by people working for him. Those atrocities, he can't run away from that.
Thousands of activists, academics and students were held without charge in the basement of Nyayo House. Prisoners say they were sometimes beaten to confess or denied food and water. After stepping down in 2002, Moi spent his final years on a sprawling estate in the Rift Valley, playing the role of elder statesman. He never addressed the rampant human rights abuses under his watch and refused to engage with Kenya's Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission established in 2008. Theory and other torture victims say it's not just Moi but the whole of Kenya that never confronted its history. There is no mention of Nyayo House in Kenya's curriculum, and promises to turn it into a museum have not been honored.